ask you, please, if at all possible, nobody else die on both sides. For Jennifer, I want to ask you right now that Jennifer has some type of peace and that whatever's going on with her, it will get better. It will get better. And there's no difference and only improvement between now and in 6 months. So take care of her. In the meantime, let the anxiety be gone there, please. Ralph Thompson lost his Judy, and it's tough. Got to understand, God, we do believe in a eternity. Understand, while we're here, though, we miss our loved ones. So please, take care of Ralph. Understand the grief that he's going through. But we want him to be able to live. Make that possible for him to live. Take care of him, please. Good. Pam is recovering, and she does keep on getting better from back surgery. Please let her keep on getting better. Take care of her. Let her get stronger, please. Jonathan and a group are taken off to Uganda to represent you, dear God. Please, please keep them safe while they're traveling there. Let them touch some lives while they're there. Know they'll represent you well, but let their mission be outstanding and bring them back safely to us, please, dear God. Once again, as all the events happening here, this place, we always want to glorify you. We want to honor you. And I selfishly ask that you give us another chance to get it right if we're not doing it the way that you like. I want to thank you again for all that you do, ever so much. I want to thank you for your son, Jesus Christ. So we pray through each and every time. Amen.
Thank you, Scotty. One of the good guys. Y'all come on in. We're going to get started here. I'm so thankful that everybody's here. And by the way, this week, family, I'm going to do my best to remember to stay where we're supposed to. Actually, Andrew got so frustrated with me that he put this piece of tape down for me tonight, so I've got to sort of stay here supposedly. We'll see how well that works. Just since we've been away from each other now for a week or two, let me kind of bring everybody back up to speed. What this began as, we were going to do a 2-3 week series. The first one was the Leadership Summit. For the first 3 weeks. The second was going to be a period of really teaching about how to make a presentation. Patterson called me and asked me to do this. His thinking is that we all have to, from time to time, be able to present things to people, whether it's on a one-to-one basis about Jesus, maybe talking to some of our friends or whatever. And so what I'm going to be doing, I think, is it's going to be that, but it's going to be slightly different. Tonight, if you were with us on our last visit, you may recall that was our second visit, and we only got through part of that. So tonight, this is going to be part 2, part B, I guess, okay? Session 2, part B, because we did session 2, part A the other day, and we'll finish this session tonight, and then next Wednesday, we'll come back for our 4th week, but we will do this on leadership. We'll do the 3rd session of the Leadership Summit, and that will leave us 2 weeks to come back and talk a little bit about how to present to other people. And again, I've got a dilemma on that, I'll be honest with you, because usually when I do this, it's like a day-long session with a group of people where I'm training them some speaking and presentation skills and things of the sort, or I'm working with one individual doing some coaching, and it's very, very customized. So what we're going to do, I'm going to have to figure out a way to do this. And I'll tell you what I'm kind of leaning into. I'm kind of thinking that what might be fun for those 2 weeks is I might come up with the 10 commandments for the speaker and how to communicate and kind of do it that way. So I've got some ideas, some things I'm kind of throwing around here, but hopefully that'll be fun and we'll enjoy that together. But tonight we're going to step back in, as I said, into our second of our 2 sessions. Let me turn this back on. Our second of 2 sessions, the approach of a leader. And as I just mentioned, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I guess now, we did the first part of this. We got into some good conversation, which was wonderful, but we didn't conclude the points. We're going to go ahead and kind of do that tonight. And please, this is not a monologue. I don't want to stand up here and just talk. I really do covet your comments. And anything you want to say, you don't have to agree. If you have a different viewpoint on something, that's what makes things interesting. So whatever works will be fine tonight. I just hope God will bless our time together, because this for me is just such a precious thing, to get to be with people that I know and I love. I look over here at Jim. Jim and I kind of have grown up here together. I mean, we've been here like forever. And Ronnie and of course Larry and some of the others. And then I've got newer friends here that I've only known for 20 years, you know. So it's and Pam, I mean, good night, Pam. We go back to the bedrock of this church together. So at any rate, I hope this will be some interest and so forth. So I'm just going to pick up what is the 10th concept of our leadership summit, and that is something that I refer to as the frustration factor. Listen, Christians, this is so important. Anytime you're going to lead, and do remember that in our very first visit, I made the point that everybody in this room is in one of three categories. We're either a leader, and we know we are. We may even have a title, who knows? But we know people are following us. Then there's that group of what I call the passive leaders. These are the people who don't think of themselves as leaders, but they really are. They're the ones that folks come to and want their opinion, they want their input. And by the way, one of the cool things about this church that I've always loved is the way we selected elders. We've always selected elders, at least as long as I've been here, based on people who were already elders. Now, maybe not formally so, but they were already shepherding, they were already sharing, they were just involved in people's lives. And that's exactly what we've just done with Michael and with Ronnie. These aren't two guys that have just been going to church here, and now we're asking them to step up to leadership. We're effectively acknowledging what they've been doing in a more formal way. And that's a pretty cool thing to do. Now, there's a third group of people here, and you're what I refer to as the leaders in waiting. Maybe you have not yet quite stepped up to the bar and said, you know, I need to kind of get into this thing in a more completed way. There's really no room on the bench for Christians. We've got to be people that are up, that are in the fray, that are involved all the time. I mean, on a worldly level, we're watching that right now. We're watching Ukraine right now, and it is just kind of like this. But if it wasn't for this heroic president of theirs, Zelensky, and his wife, and so many other people who are standing up the way they are, that country would probably have already capitulated. You see, that is a physical battle, and I'll grant you there's a lot of evil involved in that, but that is a physical world battle. We're in a spiritual battle as Christians, and our goal, our purpose for being here is to really, and I love the phrase Jesus used, we're here to be about the Father's business. So if we're going to do that, and if we're going to attempt to lead, encourage, help other people focus their lives more effectively, we're going to run into something, and that is the frustration factor. I have never yet spoken to a leader, I've never been called in to consult with people or anything else, where there wasn't a real problem with frustration within leadership. And let me kind of go on in here. Here's the deal. As a leader, your greatest source of frustration is question mark what? What is your greatest source of frustration? And if you don't think of yourself as a leader, that's okay, but kind of play like you are. If I were a leader, what would be the most frustrating part of attempting to lead? What do you think?
If they're not listening to
There you go. They're not listening. Anybody else?
complaining, lots of complaints.
Complaining. Yeah. Everybody feels like they've got the right to complain. Not too many people feel like they've got the right to take on responsibility. But you're exactly right. What else? People? Yeah, you're a great leader for one of those people out there. That's a good one. Anybody else?
Armchair quarterbacks.
Armchair quarterback. Sharon, that's so good. Say again. Cooperation. Thank you, Tommy. That's exactly right. Well, you guys are just in all over the thing. The answer is, leaders say nobody's following them. And they look around and they can't see anybody following them on the sides. They look up, they look down. There's nobody following them. I want to show you something. I'm about to show you a concept that literally changed my life when I learned about this. It changed the way I viewed leadership. It changed the way I understand today what leadership is. And it has given me the fresh horses that I needed in many cases to kind of keep going when I felt like everything around me was falling down, nobody was on board. This has helped me so much. I'll show you what it is. We have to first understand two facts. Number one, if you assume leadership, you, by definition, should always be dreaming and planning way ahead of everybody else. So in a sense, you're not even with your people. Now I don't mean that literally. You've got to be with them to be an effective leader. But in a very real way, though, at least in a cognitive way, You're always planning. You're always dreaming ahead of the others. And secondly, if we don't understand this, it's going to be a continual frustration. We are never going to have peace in our souls. We're always going to be unhappy. By the way, let me just tell you, the two great enemies of the devil in all of this, the two great enemies are apathy and cynicism. And by the way, those are just two sides of the same coin. Every leader that I've ever seen who has failed will be at least one of the two, and usually they're both. They'll become apathetic and they just say, I don't care anymore. Or they'll become, and I think this in some ways is even worse, they'll become cynical. And they'll begin to make those snide remarks and those sarcastic jokes. You've heard people do that so many times, right? And the trouble with that is it's of the devil. Now, when we get past this and we understand what causes frustration and how that frustration is good and normal, then suddenly things change. And here it is. This is the leadership graph. What it boils down to is this is you right here. Now, you're the leader, okay? And you're the one who took off at ground level, okay? Way back here at the airport. And over the days, months, years, you have grown, you continue to grow, and you've got some serious distance and a whole bunch of altitude by now, right? Now, you're leading people. Let me show you. Here's your team right here. And team, expand that. That can be your family, that can be your kids, that can be people at work, that can be people here at church, whatever your team is. This is your team. Now, by definition, again, you're dreaming and you're planning ahead of everybody else. So you're always going to be higher and you're going to be further out than any of those folks. But the problem is when we forget that, and we're out here flying along as a leader, and we look out, and we look up, we don't see anybody following us. We look down, and there's nobody following. We look right, we look left, and there's no one following us. And then we get depressed, and we say, nobody's listening to me. Nobody's following me. We see that's not true. And that's where the devil really wants our thinking to be. The Bible says the devil is the father of lies. He's the one who's always lying to us, okay? Scaring us, mucking us up, getting our psyche kicked around. You see, the truth is, these people right here would have never had this much distance, nor would they have had that much altitude, had they not been following what you're doing. They would still be stuck back here at the airport, sucking on a Coke, wondering when the plane takes off. And you see, this is what leadership is about. It's understanding that no, you're never going to have your people quite as far along as you would like for them to be. And that's a frustration, I know. But still, those people would never have moved at all. And think about it. This was the frustration Jesus had, and he was very human in cases. I mean, think about the times when he just got mad at his guys because they just weren't getting it. Okay? It's not bad to get upset about this. But we have to rally back and recenter and understand what's really coming down in these situations. And when one understands this leadership graph, then everything else falls into place. And you can lead with joy, peace. You can lead with optimism. And you're not out there all alone. So anyways, that one little concept has helped me more than, I won't say more than anything else, but it's certainly right up there in the top 10. It has changed my life. Any comments on this or thoughts? What'd you do, come in here and sleep in?
You just explained it perfectly.
Thank you, Sharon. Any thoughts on it? Okay, let's go on to this next one. It follows then that a leader should be willing and will be willing to do anything to pay any price to continue growing and changing. Your leadership, Christians, listen carefully, your leadership stops when you stop growing. So it means that we're going to do whatever we have to do to continue to grow. We're going to read the books. We're going to hang out with other leaders. Let me just say this. You're never going to be any better than the 6 or 7 people that you hang around with the very most. So it always it should be a compelling thing to try to hang out with people that are doing even better than you are. And that way, you'll learn from them, your capabilities will grow, and they'll expand. Here's this 11th concept. One of the things that has irked me no end over these years, I spent a fair amount of time visiting with leaders in corporate situations, and quite a bit of time visiting with elderships that have a lot of concerns, a lot of leadership issues. And sadly, and this is the thing that continually frustrates me, companies call me in all the time, and I love going to companies. And some of these companies will literally be spending millions of dollars every year doing training, leadership training within their own ranks. And there's nothing wrong with that. But when you get right down to it, they're doing that for one purpose, and that's to increase the bottom line, okay? Now, it has troubled me for decades as I've visited so many churches to see how little effort we tend, and there are exceptions to this, but how little effort the typical church really invests, and time and money and interest it invest in training leadership, bringing that next generation along. And what happens is we default to something that we shouldn't. We end up thinking that a good leader is the guy who's the good guy or the good gal. Kind of the person kind of goes along to get along, right? And we kind of lead into it. Let me just tell you something. Leaders should not be stupid. And sometimes we kind of default to this idea of, well, I'm just going to be kind of easygoing, and I'm not going to be hard on anything. And, passivity is not necessarily good. Sometimes you've got to sort of step up to the situation. And I'm not talking about being overly aggressive. I'm not talking about being a bull in a china shop. But we have to understand this. The best leaders are the smartest ones. Jesus talked about this also. He told his own disciples, he said, guys, I want you to be as wise as a bunch of snakes, but I want you to be as innocent and as kind as a bunch of doves. Let me tell you a parable. This is a parable. Oh, by the way, before I get to that, let me just share this. Being kind does not mean that we're going to be stupid, okay? Being kind and being stupid are a little bit different. Here's that parable I want to share with you. I call this the parable of the stones. This goes back 200 or 300 years into the very earliest days of our nation's history. Up in the Northeast, in a small hamlet, there was a cobbler. And this was a little town of a couple of hundred people. This cobbler, he was a great guy. Everybody loved him. He'd made the shoes for everybody in town. But he was not a great businessman. And he had borrowed money from the town's moneylender, who was a shark. And it was early one morning, very early, when there was a boom, 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 boom at the door of the old cobbler's shop. The cobbler gets up and opens the door, and standing out there on the town square, so everybody can hear this, is that town's moneylender. And he's looking at the cobbler, and he says, I want my money, and I want it now. The cobbler says, but sir, I don't have your money yet. Give me until next week, and I will be able to pay you back. That wasn't good enough. The two thugs that were on either side of the cobbler stepped in. They grabbed, I should have said on either side of the lender, stepped inside. They grabbed the little cobbler, drug him out here in the center of the square on the gravel, rocky drive area. And they throw the guy down. And with that, the lender begins to berate him. And he said, I want my money. I've got to get it now. And if I don't get it, I'm going to take your shop. I'm going to take your house. And I will eventually get that money too. Well, the cobbler's daughter was still inside the shop, and she was listening to all this. She couldn't take it any longer. She runs to her father, and she looks at the lender, and she says, Sir, what have we got to do to appease you? And with that, the lender looked at her and said, So, young lady, you want to get involved in this? Very well. You can do one of two things. You can turn around right now and go back inside that shop, and I will take the money. I will get your house, and I will take the shop. Or if you want me to, I will reach down right now to the gravel street, and I'll pick up two stones. I'll pick up a brown stone and a white stone, and I will throw them in my money bag. You reach inside my bag and pull out one of the stones. If you pull out the white stone, then all is forgiven, all is forgotten. I walk away with nothing. But if you pull out the brown stone, then I will get your house. I will get the shop. I will take the money. And young lady, today you will become my bride. Well, before she could even think, the old man was bent down. But she noticed that instead of picking up a white stone and a brown stone, he was actually picking up two brown stones. So thinking quickly, she said, Sir, I'll take you up on that. And she quickly reaches inside of his bag, pulls out one of the brown stones. But before anybody can see what it is, she lets it drop. And it instantly mingles back with all the stones on the ground. She looks at the lender and she says, Sir, I dropped the stone. But please, reach inside your bag and pull out the remaining stone and show it to all. Then surely they'll know the color of the stone that I pulled out. Well, the old man knew that he'd been had, but he was too embarrassed to admit what he had done. And that day he went home with no bride, no house, no shop, and no money. See, Christians, one of the most important things, especially in our culture today, that we can do if we're going to lead is be the smartest people in the room. We need to be the ones who are the best read. We need to be the ones who understand how people tick. Jesus, of course, he was divine, but this was part of his ministry, the way he dealt with people, a huge part. And if we're going to lead, I think it behooves us not to allow ourselves to be slack. I can tell you that, again, in business circles, people that default to stupidity tend to get fired. And again, it's just because they're not making the money for the company. It seems to me like we Christians should take this even more seriously because we've got the most important, and I don't mean to be dismissive of this, but we have got the most important product that has ever been presented to mankind. We need to be the very best at doing this kind of thing. Listen, again, any comments on any of this? I'm doing what I don't want to do. I'm standing up here doing all the talking. Speak up, Todd.
Sharon's going to tell you what she said last.
Thank you, Sharon. What's up?
No, what I said the last time is that you already explained it perfectly.
I gotta keep you. Okay. I'm putting the whole crowd to sleep, but Sharon makes me feel good about it, so that's I can live with that. Okay, here's the 12 concept, and this is so important. If we're going to lead, we have to understand, and I know this doesn't sound too profound, but it really is. Leaders need to be considerate. And again, this goes against world speak and the way the world tells us to do things. Now, the curious thing has been in the last 10 years, all kinds of business books on leadership have been talking more and more about being servant leaders and being considerate leaders and all. And some of that gets so touchy-feely, I don't go with it. But the point is, they're kind of, even in the secular world, beginning to realize that maybe God's ways, not that they know that it comes from the Bible, but maybe God's ways do make sense. We need to be the most considerate people in the group if we're going to be good leaders. And I'm going to share with you what I consider to be the 4 A's. 4 right A's of good leadership. Number 1, we need to step into every situation that we have with anybody we're leading with the right attitude. And I can summarize that into one word. We need to be humble. We need to understand that save for the grace of God, I could be in that same person's situation. So easy. So easy. There are some sins that I don't think I could ever commit because they're so repulsive to me, but that's not for many of them. I mean, most sins, I can see me committing them. In the right situation, under the right circumstance, I could do that. So if I'm going to try to share, lead, encourage people, I have to be the first one who's broken and who remembers the depths and the depravity of my own sin, so I can be a little bit more humble in those situations. Here's the second right. You always need to do this in the right atmosphere. You know, one of the things that comes up, and I've seen this happen so many times, and there's several elders in here tonight. Guys, would any of you agree with me that maybe the most dangerous 15 minutes of the week are those 15 minutes between church and Sunday school? When somebody out here is liable to get you plastered up against the wall and they're just giving you what for, on something. Now, the temptation in a moment like that, if you're the leader, you probably know more about the situation than the individual talking to you. And you may be a little more adept at communication. So the temptation is to really let them have it. You know they're wrong, so you really want to plow through it. You never do. You never, ever. If you're a good leader, you never do. You might win that argument, but that person will never like you again. And anybody else who sees you doing that, they won't like you either. It's important when there's a problem to have the right atmosphere. This means you're going to get away from other folks. You're going to say, hey, can we step off to a classroom, or can we maybe get to this office? Let's just sit down and chat. No embarrassment. And again, I've seen this happen in churches, but much more often I see it happen in businesses, especially in conference situations when there's a dozen people in a room and there's a boss who's trying to earn his chops or whatever's wrong with him. I don't even know what provokes this in many cases, but I've seen so many people over the years just land on one employee in that group. Now, maybe that person needs some discipline. Maybe they need to be landed on in a sense, but they don't need to be treated that way publicly. And one of the right A's is to always do any kind of leadership realignment, any sort of discipline in the right atmosphere. And that is always going to be away from other people. Does not mean that you shouldn't have one other leader with you in many cases. And one of the good things, again, about these shepherds around here, I've seen you guys do this more than once. you need to talk to somebody. Maybe it's not going to be a real pleasant situation, whatever, and you'll go in twos. That kind of gives you a little bit of cover and make sure that you guys don't go off the rails either. But at the end of the conversation, if anybody reports it one way or the other, there's some knowledge of what really happened. That's a good strategy. You need to do that too. Also, step in every situation with the right alternative. And here's the fact, and this is the deal. 90% of what we debate over has nothing to do with scriptural issues. Now, about 90% of the time we claim it does, but it really doesn't. We may have some little proof passage or some little thing we want to bring out to try to prove that we're right from the Bible and abuse the scripture, but generally it has nothing to do with scripture. Most of the time, it has to do with opinion and preference. And the deal is this. Good leadership understands that it's always easier to be critical of somebody than it is to be creative enough to come up with a better idea. I mean, when you're faced with this or this, a good leader begins to look for that. And maybe that's a better fit for everybody. Here's the fourth one. We need to have the right availability. Leadership is all about presence. You can't do it if you're not there. And that's the, this autocratic style of leadership that was the norm in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and 80s, and even into the 90s. Doesn't work. I don't know if it ever worked, but it sure doesn't work anymore. Involvement with people. And again, let's just go back to the Jesus style here. Jesus never sat in his office, He was right there with the 12 guys. And actually, there were probably, depending on the particular moment in his ministry, there were probably 100, 120 people that were traveling together most of the time with him. And he was right there with them. Now, we do understand from comments in the scriptures that he was not immediately accessible to everybody all the time. I mean, sometimes people had to come to one of the apostles and they would go to Jesus. Nothing wrong with that. But we do understand that Jesus was right there in the fray. And again, that's why I have fallen in love with Zelensky this week. I mean, what a guy. What a guy. He could have done the same thing that the Afghan president did and hightailed it out of the country with a bucket load of money. He didn't do that, did he? And again, as I said earlier, I think that's one reason why they're still standing. Guys, I feel like I'm just kind of up here doing this. Does anybody have any thoughts or any comment from this? Even when Ron adjusted his glasses, I was hoping he was going to say something. Somebody else back there. Anybody? Okay, let's go on. Let's go to this third. Sir.
I will say, I appreciate you saying being creative as an option instead of critical or whatever to try to find a better win-win for the situation. And, I never thought about it as taking creativity because you're just acting on the fly trying to move towards something better what you're dealing with at the moment. But it really is part of that. You think about us having a creator God. He's creative.
Absolutely.
And he's created us in his image. So we should have some in us to where we go down the creative path to try to create a better win-win situation to overcome whatever the challenge is, especially when there's emotion in the room.
Yeah. That's so good. The emotion is what gets in, and that causes us many times to go to our individual corners. When we do that, we can't manage the situation. And a good leader is the person who can keep centered, can keep calm enough, and not be thinking about this situation on its face, but more thinking about what are some other things we could do to make this work and bring that into the mix. And again, I know this sounds esoteric because we don't run into these situations every day, but I suspect every one of us have run into some of these situations. And it's important to have the tools in our tool set when these things come along to kind of know what to do to manage the situation effectively. Here's the third concept, and that is if we're going to be leaders, we have to have a system. One of the things I do a whole presentation on systematizing and strategies, and every now and then I'll get some old bird about my age, it's kind of like a warmed over hippie from the 60s. Say, Steve, I just don't know about that. I kind of like this free-flowing, kind of easy-going style. Good for you, but you cannot lead without a system. Jesus used systems. Do you remember when he fed the multitudes? He told them, you guys just plow out all over these hills. We'll find you with some food in a few. No, what did he tell them to do?
Sit down and groups of 50 groups.
Groups of whatever it was 50 or hundreds or whatever it was. I mean, Jesus worked with and within systems. What is a system? I love what Nelson Searcy has said, and this is so simple, it's so right. A system is nothing more than something that saves you stress, time, energy, and money. That's what a system does. And honestly, I don't need any more stress in my life. I could always use some more time. I could use some more energy, and I definitely could use some money at times. So there's nothing wrong with systems. There's everything good about it. I'm saying this because I want to lead into what Searcy is also referred to as and actually he has 8 systems. I've added one, I've modified a little bit, but these are the 9 systems of a healthy church. If Antioch is going to be the kind of church that we really need to be, we need to be aware of these 9 systems, and we need to give our ear to them and look at them. First off, any successful church is going to have a worship planning system. Simply put, this is how we plan and how we execute that 60 to 70 minutes that we have on Sunday morning. And again, people will say, well, I just don't know. I just want to let the Spirit lead. Well, yes, I mean, sure. But at the same moment, you've got classroom teachers that have prepared lessons. Why make them have to wait? Why take advantage of them? So the thing needs to be planned. It needs to be structured to the degree that we kind of know what we're going to do. And I will tell you one thing for sure, repeating the same old every week, that's one of the things I love about Antioch. We do some of that, but we don't do it like a lot of churches where you can predictably know that there are going to be 2 songs, a prayer, another song, the Lord's Supper, another song, sermon, and boom, you're out the door. We don't necessarily do that a lot, and I love that. That worship service should not be something that people can come into on autopilot and never wake up until it's over. I mean, it needs to be different, and that's important. The evangelism system. This is our plan of attack. How are we going to attract new people to our church? What are we doing to attract new people? Do we inspire our members to get more involved with their friends? Do we have a promotion of some sort that brings people in? How do we do this? And this is something, by the way, that needs to be changing on a routine basis. And again, I could do a full teach on any one of these 9. Don't have the time. That's kind of why I'm rushing so much here. But the third one is the assimilation system. This is how we plan to move first-time visitors into fully engaged members. I mean, for instance, and this is something we need to do a better job at here. Maybe you're the person who God is going to inspire even tonight to kind of get your heart around this and maybe start doing it. Why don't we, and maybe we do, maybe I just don't know about it, but why don't we have somebody here who every week has 2 or 3 people assigned to be the ones that track down people that are visiting with us and invite those people maybe to lunch? I mean, do we have a plan of attack? I know attack is maybe a hard word, but do we have a plan to really get to know folks? Successful, and by successful, I'm talking about churches that grow and that maintain their membership. Successful churches tend to do this. How about the small group system? And again, this is something we've kind of done half-heartedly. We've done a good job at times, not so good at others. But this is how we're going to fill and reproduce. We have to have a plan on how we're going to fill these groups and how we're going to reproduce them. One of the worst things a church can allow to have happen is for a group to become a group that never changes and goes on forever and becomes sort of an insulary group, and they're kind of cliquish and nobody else really feels like it. These groups need to be changing fairly routinely. We need to know what the nature and the content is going to be. Some small groups may be Bible studies. Others might be, what's my word here? I can't. Interest groups. That's good. That's just as good. I was going to say affinity, but interest groups. You know, it's where people get together, maybe a bunch of guys get together and girls that ride motorcycles, or maybe this or that, whatever it happens to be. We need to look at things like this. And I really, and again, I'm not trying to get up here and rattle anybody, but I'm just simply saying this is a good thing for a church to be doing. And by the way, the last point here, how do we maintain accountability? Now, I'll tell you, I've been at churches before where I've had elders actually invite me in to talk to them about their small groups. And I've had single elder holdouts. That's kind of what happens sometimes. And I've actually heard people say something more than once, something in the nature of, well, how are we going to keep up with what these people are doing? How are we going to know what they're studying? And how are we going to make sure that they're not doing things that we don't want them doing? You know, when you have that attitude as a leader, you've kind of lost the battle already. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's perfectly fine for elders to know what the groups are studying and doing. They probably should. But this heavy-handedness doesn't work well. It's when people love each other, and it's just kind of organic, and we kind of get together and have a sustainable approach to things. That's how great church groups, small groups, ministries happen. Number 5 is the ministry system. This is how we're going to motivate and mobilize people in our church to each one have a significant ministry. Everybody at the Antioch church, in my judgment, and every other church, needs to have a ministry that they can point to as their ministry, something that they're working on a routine basis. If they don't, they're not going to be as involved, and they're more likely to fall away. We all need to be involved. The 6th one is the stewardship ministry. Now, the Baptists sure do a lot better job at this than we do, but we need to encourage people to develop themselves as extravagant givers. I'm just saying that. Now, some people may be able to give money extravagantly. Great. Other people may not have any money. They need to give their time, their talents. I'm not talking about money only here. I'm just simply saying we need as a church to help people become abundant in what they're doing, what they're giving, and encourage that. And like I said, the Baptists, they do a pretty good job at this. I mean, sometimes a little bit too much, I guess. But in churches of Christ, I'll tell you something. If a preacher gets up and preaches about giving, I promise you on the way out the door, there'll be 20 people that'll hit him and say, well, so what are you trying to do? Get a raise? What disrespect. That's wrong. That's not the way to behave. We need to have a climate, a culture where the minister can get up, or an elder can, and speak to people about everything, including their giving. 7th ministry system is the leadership succession system. And this is how we're going to develop leaders at all levels. What are we doing right now to develop teenagers to become teachers? What are we doing right now to develop and help men mentor into the eldership? What is our succession system? And Antioch is, especially in the eldership, I think has done a way better than average job at that. I'm not sure we're doing that well with the teachers. I mean, I hear from one whom I've been married to for 45 years, pretty often talking about how she's desperately needing more teachers. We might need to look at that a little more. Number 8, how about the strategic system? Andy Stanley said something that I really like. He said, if you can't measure it, let me say that correct. He said, if you can't measure it, you cannot manage it. We have to be able to constantly look at what we're doing and in a formal way evaluate and say, is this really working? It's been several years ago now, back when Josh was here, there was a time we did a study, and I'm giving you numbers here that may be bogus, they may be off a little bit. Generally, this is what happened. We reviewed everything that was going on here at Antioch, and we have, Jim, how many ministries was it? It was like over 100 ministries, I think, that we finally identified, something like that. And then we went through, and we just all of us divvied up, took members, and kind of looked over them, and based on what we knew about them and how we identified about how many hours a year we thought that each individual member would probably be happy to be involved in ministry work. And when we added it all up, the number of ministries we had would have taken this many hours, and we had people willing to do that much work. So we had to come in here and redo some things. We whacked a lot of this down. Now, you could argue that we need to teach these people a little bit more about getting involved, but we tried to get this thing balanced. And it's important to do things like this. It's important for us to sit down every few months and say, how is that worship package on Sunday mornings looking? How is that 60 or 80 minutes that we have together on Sunday morning really looking? And are we doing the right thing by people with what we're doing? It's important to do this. And the last one is what I call the iron sharpening iron system. This isn't how we raise up new formal leadership. It's how we encourage one another. There's a passage in Hebrews chapter 10 that many of us have used, and I don't think it's been bad to use it. Where the writer says, not to forsake the assembling of the saints together as you see the day approaching. And we've used that to remind people they need to come to church. And that's part of what that writer is saying. I'm convinced of that from what study I've done on it. But there's more. Just before he gets to that, he talks about provoking each other, and really a better word, that's old King James. A better word is encouraging each other onto love and good works. What are we doing to encourage our peers? I mean, do we ever come up and say, hey, What's Jesus been doing in your life this week? Or, hey, I just read a book. I marked it up. It's going to be easy for you to go through. I want you to go through it. And then next week or whenever, let's eat lunch and talk about it. This is the kind of thing that we can do to help us become stronger and better people within the church. Comments, please?
Steve,
Yes,
I just think the iron sharpening iron is just, that's something everybody can do. You know, that's the thing about it, you know. I know for a long time, and I've told people this before, probably up to my 30s or so, I thought, I can't, you know, I don't know enough about the Bible. I don't know about this and this and this to relate to somebody, and I kept myself, you know, you know, going to church, stuff like that, I don't mean that, I'm talking about, I just didn't really put myself in a position that I needed to be doing. And then finally realized, you know, that, hey, you know, Satan's trying to keep me in this spot and say, hey, you're not ready yet.
Right.
You're ready yet. And I know when I'm talking to a lot of teenagers, stuff like that, I say, hey, you know, he's going to let you stay in that spot as long as he can keep you in there.
Absolutely.
You don't realize what you can do. And that's something, and I won't really keep going on with it, that's just something that all of us can do. If it's just a kind word or encouragement or whatever the case may be, just let somebody see that you care. And you know, we all know how good we feel when somebody gives us their attention, you know, in a supportive way.
Right.
And you think about it, you're talking about like guests coming in, stuff like that, doing the same thing with people that are coming in. Hey, let them know you're back, that they're here, and stuff like that. You know, it's such a long way. And so don't you know, we don't ever need to put ourselves in a position, especially as something that's encouragement and you know, reinforcing somebody. That doesn't take, you know, a lot.
Thank you, Ben. So true. Pat?
Well, I don't want to sound like I'm tooting on the horn, but when I was, back before I came here, I think about 79, I was going to churches, trying to find one I liked. And there were so many that I walked in and not a single person said a word to me. Nobody. Matter of fact, one church, I worked with the guy that went to church there, and he said, if you'll come Sunday, I'll find somebody to speak to you.
I've gone to churches to speak where that happened.
And a little lady was there, I remember, because she had one of those fox stoles around her. She said, me too. Me too. I mean, so now, I'll walk up. I know how that feels. I mean, they would guide me through in the front door with their hand and not say hello, you know, I mean.
Well, you know, on the heels, and by the way, those of you that don't know Pam, she is probably as effective as a personal worker. And I hate to even use that phrase, as a woman who just witnesses to her friends and brings them to Christ, as anybody that I know. And on the heels of that and what Benton said, let me just share something with you. I spent a lot of my life really believing that 90% of it was knowing the Word, getting in the Bible. You know, and I believe in getting to know the Word, okay? Please don't misunderstand what I'm saying here. And then I thought the rest of it's kind of how you feel about things or whatever. I don't believe that anymore. I got to thinking about this. You know, for the first 16 to 1800 years of Christianity, virtually no Christian ever even saw a Bible. And those that did, most of them couldn't even read the thing. Especially first century. I mean, who had the Bible? Nobody. I mean, you might get an occasional letter from an apostle or one that an apostle had written and passed among some churches. So how did this thing of ours stick together? Our Christianity is not as much a religion as it is a relation. And this is a relation of the heart, reflecting what we understand Jesus to be to other folk. So you don't have to, yes, you need to study the scriptures all the time, mainly so we can ward off some people that come along with evil teachings, misunderstandings, and things. I get that. And I'm not belittling that. But I am saying I would rather have somebody that has the heart and spirit of Jesus than somebody who's memorized a bunch of text. And you don't have to have either or, I know. But that's the kind of person I want to shepherd. And I've bumped into some pretty, as far as literacy is concerned, some pretty stupid shepherds around the country. And some of them have been some of the most godly human beings I've ever met in my life. So, just to say, thank you guys. We're going to wrap up. I got just not enough time to do this. Actually, I have two more things I want to share, but I don't have time for them. I want to tell you, though, that it is critically important if we're going to lead to stop presupposing. Stop presupposing. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. This is Stephen. He came to my house several weeks ago to pick me up. He's an Uber driver. Picked me up, take me to the airport, something I was going to. And in the car, I started asking him questions. I always do this. And I learned very quickly that he was a part-time Uber driver, and he was from Nigeria. Now, again, I'm just going to tell you what I thought. You probably don't think much of me anyway, so I don't have a lot to lose here. But let me just tell you what I thought. I'm not proud of this. But here I am thinking, man, this guy doesn't have enough on the ball to even drive Uber full-time. And Nigeria, isn't that the place where I get all those emails? Well, thankfully, we continued the conversation. By the time I got to the airport, I learned that Stephen had a master's degree in computer science from Vanderbilt. He had a PhD in physics from Alabama A&M. And oh, by the way, the reason he didn't have time to drive an Uber full-time, he was also a full-time professor at Alabama A&M. See, here I am presupposing. Riddle. Father and a son in a muscle car. The son's just bought this brand new muscle car. He's so proud of it. Dad and kid are in the thing. Kid's driving the car. He's being very reckless. Goes down. He hits a turn. He can't make the turn. Thing rolls over down the cliff. And the father is killed. The son is desperately hurt. Ambulance gets there. They get him on the gurney. Get him inside. They get him back to the hospital into surgery. 2 minutes later, surgeon comes running out and says, I can't operate on him. He's my son. Now, I don't want anybody under 40 to answer. Somebody tell me, explain that to me. You're too young.
You're under 40. Didn't matter.
Okay, Trent, okay. Go ahead, Trent.
She answered.
Say again?
She answered the question.
What'd you say, Angie?
It's
It's his mom. Now, it's not a big deal for those of you under 40, but you guys under 40 have your hang-ups too, okay? I'm just simply saying when we get our minds set on a track and we are rigid and we're not willing to look around a little bit, excuse me. Hi, folks. When we're in a track and we're not looking around, then we're going to be in trouble. Let me just share something with you that I love.
The bucks here. Oh, yeah, just keep it. It's your money now. That's. So, you know.
Not really. Are you sure?
Yeah, go ahead. It's yours.
I'm starting to tear
No,
up.
it's okay.
That's like a shoe.
It's okay. It's all right.
And
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course.
never had this in my life.
Nice meeting you. I hope you can, have a good use of that money.
It will be, sir.
Okay, great. See ya. Yeah, just keep filming. Just make sure he doesn't see you. Alright, he just came out. What do you get? Alright, let's go across the street. Let's go. yeah, I need to talk to you. I was calling you the entire time.
Oh, yeah?
After I get the money, there's a camera, my cameraman's right there, you see the camera?
Oh, yeah.
Do you even know that? Like,
No.
I feel like I owe you apologies, because you went to the liquor store, right, earlier?
Oh, you thought I was gonna get all smashed up drunk, huh?
I thought you were gonna buy like alcohol or something.
Yeah, but there's things money can't buy. Money don't, I get a happiness out of what I'm doing. No.
Here,
I'm fine.
no, you just touched my heart.